Hello, welcome to the Chirp YouTube channel. My name is Christy. I am your friendly online speech-language pathologist and specialist in children's communication development, including behavior, because behavior is a type of communication. In the last video, which you can find right there, we talked about the first of 3 brain states that we are going to discuss, and that was safety. And the question is, am I safe? In this video, I'm going to talk about the second brain state, which is the emotional brain state. And the question is, am I loved? Now, you may be wondering, is this an important question for a child to ask, for a child to have answered? And the answer is that if I do not feel safe physically, if I do not feel loved, I am never going to be able to move to the third brain state, which is the executive brain state, which is where I'm able to use my brain, which is where I'm able to actually make decisions and think about things. Think about thinking. Wonder if I'm assessing things properly. It's the state where I'm able to learn, where I'm able to interact in a successful way and build relationships. If I don't have the foundation of being safe and loved, I am not going to be able to thrive and flourish in the executive state. What are some of the behaviors that you might see if a child is functioning in the emotional state? Well, you're going to see behaviors that either try to draw you in, such as being clingy or super needy or criticizing other people. A lot of times it's very easy to bond with other humans by criticizing other people. In my family, with my mom specifically, it was kind of a sport to watch people walk by and look at all the things that were wrong with them compared to us, of course, because we do A, B, and C. Those people clearly do not do those things. Therefore, they are them and we are us, and us is better than them. It's very easy to bond in this way, but it is not a healthy bonding, because if I grow up criticizing people for any specific behaviors, then it's hard to build relationships because I'm always really critical of other people, but I'm probably also excessively critical of myself. So you might see criticism in these children, but you might also see behaviors that appear to repel relationships, such as being really super negative, disagreeing with everything, such as the teacher says, "The moon's in the sky," and the kid says, "No, it isn't. There is no moon." I have a little guy like this right now that I'm working with, and the more I have read up on the emotional state and the question, am I loved, the more convinced I am that this is at the base of many of his behavior difficulties. He needs constant reminders of the fact that he is loved, the fact that he is special, that we value him, that we want him in our group, in our classroom, that I love him. I write him little notes every time I see him. "I love you. You're super." And not only that, but in order to help kids feel loved, we can give them some jobs. Giving kids jobs helps them to feel a part of something, a part of a team. And it's very helpful for creating a sense of family. If you have a child in your family who needs to know that he or she is loved, maybe consider assigning jobs, because that really fosters teamwork. Also, you could consider giving words of encouragement. If you wonder how a child is going to feel loved, how do you feel loved? There are, of course, the 4 love languages, which you have probably heard of. It is a book that talks through a variety of different ways that human beings can give and accept love. Maybe your child has one of those and you can learn a little bit more about that. I'll put a link to that book down below. But words of encouragement never hurt. It never hurts for us to tell children things we appreciate about them, things we know that they're doing that are difficult for them, and we're proud of them. On this topic, I also want to say that one of the things that we can do is we can talk about our challenges with empathy. We know that children are going to have behavior problems when they feel unsafe or unloved. Even if we're not purposefully causing them to feel unsafe or unloved, children have interesting triggers sometimes. Sometimes they're born just with a deeper need for connection than other children have. We all have a need for connection, but some of us have a real need to feel it in certain ways, and if we don't, it's difficult for everyone. Especially children who naturally have difficulty controlling themselves. They are told regularly that they are bad, that they're not good enough. They are shamed for their behavior. And that is not something that we should be doing. We need to be very careful with how we talk with children about their behavior, because helping shape their behavior, helping them learn how to manage themselves better, is very different from shaming children. Shaming children is not okay. Helping children learn how to manage themselves better is a plus. Yes, please, let's do that. How would I define shaming a child? Shaming a child is, how could you do this? What were you thinking? Come on, I know you can do better than this. Look at all the other kids. You should be acting like that. Why are you acting like this? A lot of that is the tone and the facial expressions that I'm using with the child. But let's talk about this in another way. We can talk about comparing ourselves to other first graders. Okay, Mason, why do you think you're in Miss Christie's group instead of with the other first graders? Let's look at some of the stuff that they're doing that you're not doing. Can you see anything that's different? What do you think is different? That conversation actually went quite well with my little friend. He said, oh, they're sitting in their spot. And I said, okay, and what else? He said, they're not talking or throwing anything. Yes, that's right. And guess what? When we keep practicing and when you are able to do those things, then you get to sit with the first graders instead of in Miss Christie's group. Although I love you and I like sitting by you, but I know you'd like to be with the first graders. That was a conversation I actually did have this last week. Another conversation that I regularly have with my students is about the fact, this is on the topic of empathy, working on our issues, but with empathy and acceptance. We talk a lot about how each human has different needs. We have different things we need to be working on. Each of us struggles in different areas, and it's not my job to judge you because you're working on using 3-word sentences and I'm working on speaking in full sentences. There's no judgment. We're all at a different level of development. We all have come into this world with certain skills and abilities, and it's our job to maximize those. Now I realize that not every person is interested in maximizing his or her abilities, but I like to be an idealist and say that we all should be. We all should be assessing ourselves. We should be assessing our character, and we should be growing in many different areas. We should have goals. I'm not talking about necessarily the 7 habits of highly effective people type goals. I'm talking about, I would like to be better at gardening. So I'm reading books about plants. I've planted new plants and I'm experimenting with how they thrive or not. I would like to be a much kinder and more patient person. And I'm working on that. I'm working on that through self-assessment and awareness. I'm working on that through prayer. I'm working on that through hanging out with people who are working on the same thing, and we can talk about how we're doing, because it's a really hard thing to learn. And this is something I can share with students. There is no judgment here. I'm not unloving just because I'm aware of the fact that we are all working on different things. Mason, what are you working on? Can you think of something right now? Yes, you're working on being like those other first graders. So you're working on sitting in your spot. And what else? What else was it? Oh yes, you're working on not throwing things and talking less when the teacher is talking. That is right. Those are things you're working on. What do you think our friend Becky is working on over there? Can you remember some of the things she's working on? That's right. She doesn't talk with her mouth yet. She is working on learning to say some words with her mouth. That's a really good thing to learn, don't you think? There's no shame in any of this. Things in our brain affect our behavior as well as our talking. A child with a diagnosis of autism who hasn't yet learned to talk verbally is no different from a child with a behavior disorder or challenging behavior undiagnosed who is learning how to manage himself better. Both of them have something going on in their brain that is affecting their behavior, what comes out. And in fact, there is some new science suggesting that children with oppositional defiant disorder, diagnosed serious behavior condition, have too much of certain alarm chemicals being produced by their brains. If they are constantly feeling unsafe and unloved because of those chemicals, they're not able to move to a brain state where they can function and where they can be calm and where they can think about how they want to behave rather than just reacting. And we need to have empathy towards these children as well. I understand. I have dealt with a lot of really challenging behaviors, aggression, defiance, pretty much all of it. And I know that it is really easy to just assume children are being bad because they're just naughty kids or their parents are pretty much terrible. And that is almost never the case. Every child wants to be calm. Every child wants to be able to behave in a way that makes adults proud and happy because they get safety from adults. You want to please people who are managing your life. You want to please the people who are in control over you because it's natural. And the fact that so many children can't really signals that it is not because they just don't want to. There's something else going on. Part of it is something misfiring in their brains. And I think the most important thing that we can do for these kids with really serious behavior challenges is to help their bodies feel safe and to help their emotions, to help them feel loved, speaking to them with respect, even when they are not behaving how we want them to, and treating them with acceptance and love, even when we don't see the kind of behavior that we want. I realize that's really super challenging. But some things to take away. Think about ways that you can help this particular child you're thinking of feel more a part of the team. If you're in a classroom, make sure this child has a very important job in the class. If possible, have this child help other children. Share with this child, okay, like we talked about, Becky is working on learning to talk using her words, using her mouth. What I would like is at story time, if you sit right in front of Becky, and when I give you a word, you say, cow, and you hold up a picture and you say cow right in front of Becky so she can see how to do it. I think that would be really helpful. We can give kids jobs that help them to feel accepted and needed and therefore important and loved. And we can use words of encouragement, and we can share with empathy the fact that everyone has things. We all have stuff that we are working on if we want to be better people, and we all do want to be better people. So just because your thing is different from my thing doesn't mean that my thing is not important, and it doesn't mean that your thing is not important. We can help each other in this journey. These are really big steps. They're super hard to put into practice because all we want to do is slam that little person into line and make him or her behave how we want. But in these kids with brain things happening, it's like telling a person with a panic disorder to calm down. That is not how it works. There are too many neurochemicals zooming around in there for someone to just calm down. And it's the same with these kids. We can't just tell them, settle down, stop being crazy, because it's not up to them. Their brains are awash in neurochemicals, and the only way that we can help them settle those down is by consistently making sure they know that their bodies are safe and that their self is loved and accepted. And then we can move on to the third state, the executive state, where children are able to better assess their own behavior and manage themselves before it gets out of control. But we're not there yet. This is just a discussion about the emotional state. Thank you for being here. There are no easy answers when it comes to challenging behavior. I'm sorry to tell you. A lot of families I've worked with, a lot of people in institutions like schools and churches, they would like to believe that you bring in a professional, the professional puts this one strategy into place, and there's no more challenging behavior. But sadly, there is no such strategy that will fix everything, unless there's one issue that's leading to, like a kid has a sensory issue. Find out more about that right there. And we can fix it by providing that sensory input. Sometimes that does happen. But in most cases, it's long-standing issues that are not fixed overnight. So keep it up. Go look at the resources I've linked down below, and go out and be as loving as you possibly can to these kids who are awash in crazy neurochemicals and need to feel the calm of being accepted. Don't we all need to feel that? I certainly do. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time. Bye.